That box of borax under your sink, the one you bought for $1 or $2 and forgot about, it can do nearly everything the expensive bottles do, and the reason it isn't working for you isn't the borax, it's the way you've been told to use it. You've been doing it wrong. Not your fault. Nobody ever showed you the right way. I grew up plain in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. No power lines running to the house. No store-bought sprays lined up on a shelf. We had a white box of borax in the wash house, and that same box did the laundry, kept the ants out of the cellar, cleaned the milk pails, and even helped the garden grow. One box, a few cents. And it lasted us half a year. Now here's the thing the outside world won't tell you. The folks who sell you the $40 ant traps, the special weed sprays, the wood treatments, the fancy laundry boosters, they have no reason to tell you what my grandfather already knew. Because a man who knows how to use one cheap box of powder is a man who stops buying from them, and that costs them money. So stick with me, because right around the middle of this, I'm going to show you the one borax trick my community used on the fruit trees. The one that put more apples on the branch than the neighbors got with all their store-bought feed. It costs less than a cup of coffee, and almost nobody outside the plain communities knows it. We never stopped doing it. The English just forgot. Before we go further, do me one small favor. Drop your state in the comments. Just the state. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, wherever you're sitting. Because borax behaves a little different depending on your soil and your weather, and I want to know who I'm talking to. I still remember my grandfather standing at the workbench in the harness shop, dipping his fingers in a bowl of warm borax water before he cleaned a wound on the mule's leg. He didn't call it an antiseptic, he just called it the white powder. And it worked when nothing fancy was around. That's the thing about plain living. You learn what truly works because you can't run to the store every time something goes wrong. So let's start with the mistake. The big one. The one that makes people throw their borax in the trash and say it doesn't work. Most folks use borax dry. They sprinkle the powder straight out of the box onto the ant trail, onto the weeds, into the carpet, and they wait. And nothing much happens. The ants walk around it, the weeds shrug it off, and the person decides the old powder is useless and goes back to buying the expensive stuff. But here's what they were never told. Borax wants water. It is a mineral, a salt, the same family as the salt on your table, and like all salts, it does its real work dissolved. Dry, it's just dust sitting on a surface. Dissolved in warm water, it becomes a thing that moves, that soaks in, that gets carried where it needs to go. My grandmother never once sprinkled it dry. Every single time, she stirred it into warm water first. A heaping spoon into a quart of warm water, stirred until the cloudiness cleared. That was the rule. Water first, always. And the science backs the old woman up. Borax, the real name is sodium tetraborate, only releases its working power when it breaks apart in water into the parts that actually do the job. Sprinkle it dry and you've got a pile of crystals that mostly sits there. Dissolve it and you've got something that creeps into a crack, climbs into an ant's body, soaks into a board, feeds a root. Same powder, completely different result. The water is the secret nobody bothered to mention. So already, if you do nothing else today, you know more than most. Warm water first, but that's only the beginning. Because where you put that borax water and how strong you mix it changes everything. And getting the strength wrong is where most people ruin their results and sometimes ruin their soil. Let me show you the ants first, because that's the one that drives people half crazy. You see one ant on the counter, then 10, then a line of them marching to the dog bowl like they pay rent. You buy the traps. Little plastic discs, $4 or $5 a piece, and you set them out, and for a day it seems to work, and then they're back marching a new road across your floor. Here's why the store traps cost what they cost, and here's why a box of borax does the same job for pennies. The active ingredient in most of those expensive ant baits is a borate. It's a cousin of the very borax in your cupboard. They take the cheap mineral, mix it with a sugar, seal it in plastic, slap a brand on it, and charge you 20 times the price. You're buying the plastic and the name, not the medicine. Now here's the part the old folks understood that the trap makers gloss right over. You do not want to kill the ant you can see. You want to kill the nest you can't see. The whole colony, the queen down in the dark, and the only way to do that is to let the worker ants carry the poison home and feed it to everybody, including her. That takes patience. That takes a bait slow enough that the worker lives long enough to share it. So here's what my mother did, and it never failed. Take 1 teaspoon of borax, mix it into half a cup of warm water. Stir in about a half cup of sugar, real sugar, until it's a thin syrup. Soak a few cotton balls in it. Set them on little squares of cardboard right where you see the ants traveling. Don't kill the ants on the counter. Let them drink. Let them carry it home. For 3 or 4 days, you'll actually see more ants, not fewer. And that's when most people panic and clean it up. And that's the mistake. More ants means it's working. They found the food, and they're hauling it back down into the nest, feeding the young, feeding the queen. By day 5 or 6, the line goes quiet. By day 10, the nest is dead from the inside. Not just the ants you saw, the whole family. The strength matters, though. People think more borax means more dead ants. The opposite is true. Too strong, and the worker dies right there on the cotton ball before he makes it home, and the queen never gets her share. You want it weak enough to be a slow poison, less than 1 part borax to 10 parts sugar. The weak mix kills the colony. The strong mix just kills the messengers. Remember that, because that idea, weak does more than strong, comes back again and again with this powder. And it's the single thing the outside world gets most wrong. Now you're keeping the ants out for the price of a teaspoon. But ants aren't the only thing that marches into an old house. And the next pest is one the chemical companies have built an entire fortune on. Because most folks would never guess that the same white box handles it just as well. Cockroaches, fleas, the crawling things that get into a carpet in a cupboard and make you feel like your own home isn't clean, no matter how hard you scrub. I know plenty of you watching keep a tidy house. This isn't about clean. The cleanest farmhouse in the valley still gets fleas when the barn cats come inside in the fall. It's just life. The question is what you reach for. The exterminator wants $150 to walk through your door, and the spray bottles at the store run $10, $12, $15 and smell like a chemical plant, and you've got to leave the house while they dry and keep the grandkids off the floor, and still they come back. Here's the quiet truth. A great many of those professional powders are borate based. You're paying for a fancy label on the same mineral sitting in your wash house for fleas in a carpet. Here's the old way, and it's so simple it almost feels like cheating. On a dry day, take your borax powder, and this is the one time we use it dry, and sprinkle a light dusting over the whole carpet. Not a heap, a light snow. Then take a stiff broom and work it down into the fibers, down to the base where the flea eggs hide. Let it sit overnight, a full day if you can, then vacuum it all up. Here's why it works, and it's almost cruel in its simpleness. A flea has a hard, waxy shell that holds its water in. The fine borax crystals are sharp and drying. They scratch that waxy coat and pull the moisture right out of the flea and the eggs, and the thing dries up and dies. It doesn't poison them so much as it dries them to dust. No chemical smell. No leaving the house. Just a mineral doing what minerals do. A word of care, because I won't lead you wrong. Keep the cat and dog off it while it's down, and don't use it on a damp carpet where it'll clump and vacuum it up good when you're done. Done right, 1 box does the whole house, and a few cents of powder replaces a season of expensive sprays. So now your floors are handled. But the same drying power that kills a flea does something else entirely. Something that turns this little box from a pest killer into a thing that protects your whole house from the inside out. And this is where the savings stop being pennies and start being hundreds, maybe thousands. I'm talking about wood, rot, and the things that eat it. If you own an older home, and a lot of you do, the thing that takes it down in the end is almost never a storm. It's the slow stuff. The damp sill under a window, the bottom of a porch post, the floor joist over the crawl space, carpenter ants tunneling through a beam, termites you never see until the damage is done. And the companies that treat for this, they don't come cheap. A termite treatment can run you $1,000 and more, and the wood preservers at the store, the ones in the green and yellow jugs, they want $30, $40 a bottle. Now, here is something that genuinely surprised me when I dug into how the outside world handles this. A whole line of professional wood treatments, the ones builders and pestmen use, the ones that cost a small fortune, are made from a borate disodium octaborate, they call it, a long name for a close cousin of plain borax. They dissolve it in water and brush it on raw wood, and it soaks in, and it makes the wood something that fungus can't rot and insects can't stomach. And they charge a builder's price for it. My people have brushed borax water onto the underside of barn boards and the bottoms of fence posts for longer than anybody can remember. We didn't have a name for the chemistry. We just knew the treated boards lasted and the bare ones rotted. The English finally put a long name on it and a high price tag, but the plain folks were doing it the whole time. Here's the how. For raw, untreated wood, the kind in a crawl space, a shed frame, the back of an old fence post, you mix a strong borax solution, warm water, and stir in as much borax as the water will hold until no more will dissolve and a little settles at the bottom. That settling tells you it's saturated, as strong as it gets. Brush it on heavy, 2 coats, let the first soak in before the second. The borate soaks into the wood fibers and stays there. It makes the wood taste like death to a termite and turns it into ground a rot fungus can't grow on. Now understand the limits, because I won't oversell you. This is for wood that doesn't get rained on directly, since borax washes out with steady water. Inside a crawl space, under a porch roof, in a shed, in a basement, it's wonderful. Out in the open rain, you'd want to seal over it. But for all that hidden wood that quietly rots an old house out from under its owner, a few dollars of borax brushed on does the work of a $40 jug and a $1,000 visit. And here's the cost of not knowing this. People let the hidden wood go because the treatment scares them with its price. The rot creeps, the ants tunnel, and 5 years later, it's not a brush and a box of powder anymore. It's a contractor and a new sill and a bill that ruins a month. The cheap fix, done early, was always there. They just never told you the green jug and the white box were close kin. Now we've kept the pests out and the wood sound, but I promised you the fruit trees, and that's where this gets good, because this is the one even most gardeners have never heard right. And maybe that's the kind of knowledge you want, more of the deep, recovering kind that was nearly lost. If that's so, I want you to know that I've put a great deal of what my community carried, the soil secrets, the harvest methods, the old pest cures, into a pair of books called The Garden Blueprint and The Harvest Blueprint, collected together as The Complete Garden Field Edition. It's the knowledge the plain folks never lost, written out plain, for anyone who wants to stop buying back what was always theirs to keep. You'll find the link down in the description, and it's worth a look before the season gets ahead of you. But let's stay with the fruit trees now, because this is the trick I promised you at the very start. Stay with me, because this is the trick from my community I told you about at the start, and it's worth the whole video. Let me tell you about boron. In the soil, plants need a handful of big nutrients, the ones everybody knows, nitrogen and the rest. But they also need a few tiny ones, in such small amounts you'd think they barely mattered. Boron is one of those. And here's the strange, important truth about boron. The plant needs only a whisper of it. But without that whisper, the whole thing falls apart. Boron is what lets a plant move its sugars around and set its fruit and seed. When a plant is short on boron, the flowers don't set fruit right. The apples come out small and corky, with brown spots inside. The cauliflower turns hollow and brown in the middle. The beets crack and go black-hearted. The celery splits. The strawberries come out lumpy and misshapen. A gardener sees all that and blames the weather, blames the bugs, buys more of the big fertilizer, and none of it helps, because the missing thing was never in the big bag. It was boron. A trace. A whisper. And where does boron come from? In a cheap, pure, easy form. The very box of borax under your sink. Borax is sodium and borate, and that borate is boron. It is, quite simply, the cheapest source of plant boron on Earth. The garden centers sell little bags of trace minerals for real money. You've had the purest one in your laundry cupboard the whole time. Now here is where I have to slow you down and speak plain, because this is exactly where the outside world goes wrong and ruins their soil, and it's the heart of why I made this whole video. The line between too little boron and too much is razor thin, thinner than with almost anything else you'll ever put on a garden. A whisper feeds the plant, a spoonful too much poisons the ground, and not just for this year. Boron can stay in the soil and hold back growth for 2 or 3 seasons. People hear borax helps the garden, so they dump it on like fertilizer, thick and dry, and they burn their soil and swear the old powder is poison. They were half right. Too much is poison. The right amount is a miracle. The difference is the whole trick. Oregon State University's extension, the folks who study orchards out where they grow apples and pears by the million, lay it right out. For fruit trees showing boron shortage, they have folks dissolve borax in water and apply it in a careful, measured dose. Because, in their own words, the gap between not enough and too much is dangerously narrow. That's the modern science. And it lands exactly where my grandfather already stood, brushing a weak boron water around his trees once a year and never, ever more. So here is the way we did it and the way you can do it this weekend. This is for an established tree or garden, mind you, not a seedling. For a full-grown fruit tree, apple, pear, plum, you take just 1 ounce of borax, that's about 2 level tablespoons, no more, and you dissolve it fully in 2 gallons of warm water. Stir it till it's gone clear, then you pour that around the drip line of the tree, out where the branches reach to, not against the trunk, spread over the whole circle. Once a year, in the early spring, that's it. 1 ounce, 1 tree, 1 time a year. For a vegetable garden, it's even gentler. 1 tablespoon of borax dissolved in 1 gallon of warm water, and that gallon is enough to lightly water a patch the size of a small room, and you do it once at the start of the season. The plants that respond like magic are the ones I named: cauliflower, broccoli, beets, turnips, cabbage, celery, apples, pears, strawberries. Those are the boron-hungry ones. Use it on those, lightly, once, and watch the difference in how the fruit sets and fills. And here is the rule that keeps you safe, the rule my people live by without ever reading a study. When in doubt, use less. You can always add a second whisper next year. You cannot take it back out of the soil once it's in. Weak does more than strong. There it is again, the same lesson as the ants, the same lesson as everything in that white box. I had an uncle who kept the finest apples in the church district. Big, sweet, never a corky brown spot in the middle, while his neighbor's apples came out small and bitter year after year. The neighbor finally asked him what feed he used, expecting some secret blend. My uncle just smiled and said, "A spoon of the wash powder in a bucket of water once in the spring." The neighbor didn't believe him, thought he was being cheap with the secret. But that was the whole secret. A spoon of the wash powder. The boron the trees were starving for, given in the one amount that helps instead of harms. Now I know what some of you are thinking right about now. This all sounds fine for a man starting a fresh garden or building a new shed. But what about the rest of us? With the yard we've had for 30 years, the established beds, the old trees, the lawn, we're not about to tear up. Does any of this help a place that's already lived in and set in its ways? It helps you most of all. And let me give you something you can do this very weekend on the yard you already have with nothing but the box you already own and a watering can. Walk out to your established beds. The boron trick I just gave you works better on settled, mature soil than on anything new, because old garden beds, the ones worked and harvested year after year, are exactly the ones most likely to be drained of their trace minerals. Every head of broccoli you ever carried out of that bed took a little boron with it and never gave it back. After enough years, the bed is quietly starved. That's why some of you have noticed your beets aren't what they were 20 years ago. Your cauliflower goes hollow, your strawberries come out small and knotted. It isn't your age, and it isn't bad luck. It's a tired bed missing a trace mineral, 1 week watering of borax solution, the gentle garden dose, 1 tablespoon in a gallon, and you're putting back, 30 years of harvests carried off, no tilling, no tearing up, just a watering can and 10 minutes. And while you're out there with that, can look at your brick walks and your stone patio, the established ones with the green slime and the black mold that comes back every wet spring, no matter how you scrub. The pressure washer fellow wants $100 to blast it, and it's back by next fall. Mix a strong borax solution, a half cup to a gallon of warm water, and brush or pour it right onto that mold and slime. The borate stops the fungus from growing back. So it doesn't just clean it, it keeps it gone longer than any pressure washer can. Let it sit, give it a scrub, rinse it where plants are nearby so the runoff doesn't carry boron into the beds. Old walk, new look, a few cents. And one more for the established home, since we're here. That musty smell in the old closet, the back of the cupboard, the basement corner where the damp gets in. A small open dish of dry borax set in the back draws damp and fights the mildew that makes that smell. My grandmother kept a little cloth bag of it in the linen chest her whole life. The sheets always came out smelling clean, never musty, even in the wettest part of the year. Costs nothing, lasts months, works on the house you've already got. So don't let anybody tell you this is only for folks starting fresh. The longer you've owned your place, the more these old tricks have to give you, because the longer a thing has been lived in, the more it's been quietly drained of what these minerals put back. Now let me come back to the laundry, because it's where most of you first met this box, and even there, almost everybody uses it wrong. You've seen borax sold as a laundry booster. You toss a scoop in the wash and you can't really tell it did anything, so you stop bothering. Here's what's actually happening, and here's how to make it earn its keep. Borax raises the water's pH, makes it more alkaline, and in plain words, it softens hard water. If you've got hard water, and most well water and a lot of city water is hard, your detergent is spending half its strength just fighting the minerals in the water before it ever gets to your dirt. The borax neutralizes that hardness so your soap can do its real job. The result is you can use half the detergent and get cleaner clothes. That's the part the detergent companies would rather you didn't sit with too long. A half cup of borax in the wash lets you cut your detergent in half. Over a year of laundry for a family, that's real money kept in your pocket and out of theirs. They sell you a giant jug of soap and tell you to use a full scoop every time. The plain truth is, with a little borax softening the water, you never needed that much soap to begin with. They were selling you around the problem instead of solving it. We solved it for pennies in a wash house with no electric 3 generations back. And for the set-in stains, the collar grime, the work clothes that come home from the barn, you make a paste. Borax and a little warm water worked into a paste, rubbed right onto the stain, let it sit a quarter hour before it goes in the wash. The same drying, lifting action that pulls water out of a flea, pulls grease and grime up out of the cloth. One box. The laundry, the stains, the water softening, all of it. And it sits there next to detergent that costs 10 times as much per wash. Let me pull back for a moment, because I think you can feel the shape of it now. One mineral, $1 or $2 a box. And we've walked through ants, fleas, roaches, wood rot, termites, mold, garden minerals, fruit trees, laundry, hard water, stains, and the musty closet. One box. And against it stands a whole row of store shelves, every one of those jobs split off into its own expensive bottle with its own brand and its own promise. The ant bottle, the flea bottle, the wood jug, the mold spray, the trace mineral bag, the fruit tree feed, the laundry booster, the water softener. 8 or 10 products, 8 or 10 prices, all doing what one box of plain mineral has always done. That's not an accident. That's a business. An entire industry built on taking one cheap, simple thing and selling it back to you 10 times over, each time dressed in different plastic. They have every reason in the world to keep you from seeing that it's all the same powder. Because the day you see it, you stop buying 9 of those 10 bottles. My people never bought them in the first place. Not out of cleverness, out of plainness. We had the one box, and we learned what it could do, because we had to. Now, I told you at the start I had a finale. The one thing even the gardeners who know the boron trick have usually never heard. So lean in, because this is the recovered piece, the one that was nearly lost. It's about the seeds, about starting them. Everybody worries over their seedlings dying. You start your tomatoes or your peppers or your cabbage indoors in the spring. The little sprouts come up green and hopeful, and then one morning a whole tray of them is keeled over, pinched and brown right at the soil line, like somebody nipped them with scissors. Dampen off, the old folks called it. It's a fungus that lives in the soil and the water, and it kills more homegrown seedlings than frost. and forgetting to water put together, a whole tray gone overnight. Weeks of work and the start of your whole garden wiped out by a fungus you can't even see. The garden stores sell fungicides for it, of course. Little bottles, $8, $10, with warnings all over them about keeping them away from food and children, which is a strange thing to put on something you're going to grow vegetables in. Here's the recovered way, and it ties this whole video together. A very weak borax solution used as the water you mist your seed trays with holds back the damping off fungus the same way it protects the wood and the stone. The borate makes it ground the fungus can't grow on, but in a dose weak enough that the tender seedling drinks it up unharmed and even takes a touch of that boron it'll need later. We're talking truly weak. Less than 1/8 of a teaspoon of borax to a full gallon of water. A whisper of a whisper. You mist the surface of the soil with it when you sow, and again lightly as the sprouts come up. The fungus that would have flattened the tray can't get a grip, and your seedlings stand up straight and live. That razor-thin line matters more here than anywhere because seedlings are tender and boron is strong. Too much, and you'll do the fungus's job for it. So you measure careful, and you keep it weak. 1/8 of a teaspoon, no more, in a full gallon. When in doubt, weaker, the same law that runs through everything in that box. I learned it watching my grandmother start the cabbage and the broccoli in flats in the wash house window, the same window where the borax box sat on the sill. She'd mix a little of the white powder into the watering can, so little you'd think it was nothing, and her flats never went down to the damping off the way other folks did. I asked her once why she put the wash powder in the seed water. She said because the good Lord gave us the mineral and the sense to use it small, and it'd be a waste not to. That was the whole teaching. Use it small. Don't waste what you've been given. And when I went looking all these years later to see if the outside world had caught up, there it was in the extension research and the old agricultural bulletins, borates holding back the very soil fungi that cause damping off. The fungicide companies know it. The professionals know it. It's just never been told plain to the regular gardener because the regular gardener is supposed to buy the little bottle with the warnings on it. The plain people never stopped using the wash powder in the seed water. The English forgot and then sold the memory back at a markup. Now you've got it again, the way my grandmother had it, for less than the price of a coffee. So let's bring it home. Think about what you actually walked in here with. A box of cheap white powder you half thought didn't work, that you'd been told to sprinkle dry and forget, and look at what you're walking out with. A dead ant colony for a teaspoon. A flea-free carpet with no chemical smell. Wood that won't rot, a patio the mold won't return to, fruit trees that set heavy and sweet, beets and broccoli that fill out the way they did when you were young, half the laundry soap doing twice the work, and a tray of seedlings standing up straight where they used to fall. None of that was ever really lost. It was just buried under marketing, split into a dozen bottles, and sold back to you a piece at a time for years. The plain folks never lost it because we never had the money or the inclination to buy the dozen bottles in the first place. We kept the one box and the knowledge of how to use it small and use it right. That's not being behind the times. That's being free of them. And maybe that's who you are too. Somebody who's tired of paying 10 prices for one mineral. Somebody who'd rather know how a thing works than trust the label on a bottle. Somebody who reckons that if the good Lord and the good earth already provided it, it's foolishness to keep buying it back at a markup. If that's you, then you and my people are cut from closer cloth than you might have guessed. So here's what I'd ask. Back at the start, I asked you to drop your state in the comments, and I meant it because I want to know who's out there and what your soil and weather are like. So tell me just your state, and while you're there, tell me which one of these you're going to try first. The ants, the wood, the fruit trees, the seedlings. Write it down in the comments. Don't just think it. Telling me makes it more likely you'll actually walk out to that shed this weekend and do it, and I read what you write. And if you'd like more of this, the old plain ways that the outside world forgot and then sold back to you, then come along with us. Not to support a channel, to join a bunch of folks who are quietly taking back the knowledge that was always ours to keep, subscribe, and stay close. Because next time, I'm going to show you the one common kitchen staple, cheaper even than this box, that my grandfather used to keep his stored seeds and his root cellar potatoes from sprouting and rotting clear through to spring. The neighbors lost half their cellar every winter. We didn't. and the reason is something almost nobody outside the plane communities has ever heard. I'll see you there.